So how do we change that? How do we take control of our thoughts and use our mind for our own purposes rather than being controlled and at the mercy and you know and in pain as a result of our own thoughts? How do we change that? Well, for me, there's a fairly simple step-by-step process to go through to change them. So the first thing I would do, that I think that we kind of need to do with this is we need to develop. It's fairly simple, but we need an awareness. We need to develop an awareness of what our thoughts are like. So how do you do that? What's the best way to do this? Well, I've done this and I do it with kind of many clients. And I think kind of one of the things that's really helpful is something like meditation. And it's not all robes and chanting and incense and all of that. It's about sitting in silence and observing. So there's a few apps that you can use for it. Kind of Headspace is very good. That's probably my favorite app for learning to meditate. But also there's kind of the Calm or the Daily Calm. The reason I like Headspace kind of really taught me or gave me the ability to focus my mind and notice where my thoughts were going and take my attention off that thought, which would then, if I left it on, it might generate emotions and go down a rabbit hole. Headspace allowed me to learn to take my focus and take it off something and put it on something else that was going to be more useful for me. So when I'm thinking about what meditation's for, it is very much obviously to allow us to be aware of thoughts, but not only does it give us an awareness of what our thoughts are like, which is interesting in itself, it gives us the ability to control where our focus is going at any given point in time. And so just imagine if you could keep your mind off of the negative thoughts and redirect it into things that were more helpful, then kind of what might that be like for you? So meditation is kind of really good. But even just sitting in silence for a few minutes. So initially I was thinking 5 or 10 minutes, but even 2 or 3 minutes, just sit in silence for 2 or 3 minutes each day and take stock of or note of where your thoughts are at. And I guess you can also look at your feelings and emotions, but yeah, just start looking at those thoughts and see kind of what kind of stuff's going on in your head. So that's the first thing you need. If you're going to change something, because in essence this is our unconscious serving us up stuff, we need to move from the unconscious into the conscious, and that's where developing an awareness comes from. And you won't be able to improve it, you won't be able to change it, you'll be stuck with the pain unless you can get awareness of your thoughts. So there's a step-by-step kind of process for this. So that's the first thing that you would do. You would kind of develop an awareness. The second thing you would do is you would examine the stories that you're telling yourself. And this is kind of where our language is really interesting. Well, I think most of us know that human beings we're hardwired to be naturally pessimistic, so it's no big surprise that our stories are going to be negative. But look at the language that you use when you're telling yourself stories. Kind of often we catastrophize or are overly dramatic, and what's really interesting is that most of us have got a much bigger vocabulary in the negative than we have in the positive. So we can describe a bad morning like it was a car crash or a train wreck, or it's a catastrophe or a nightmare. But when it's positive, it's like, yeah, it was good. You know, we're kind of really quite kind of muted, I guess, kind of in terms of our language. So we're very skilled with the negative language, but we don't have lots of great positive language. And so that doesn't help, because again, I don't know if you know that for every one negative thing you tell yourself, you need at least 3 positive things to balance it out, maybe as much as 6 positive things to balance one negative. So yeah, we want to be really aware of what the balance is of the stories that we're telling ourselves. A funny little story just off to the side. If I go home and my girlfriend says to me, I really like your t-shirt, your hair looks nice in that, and I loved your last video, then once there's been 3 good things, I know there's a bad thing coming. I know that she's just teeing it up, because she knows that rule too. So it's a bit of fun on her part to allow her to say the thing that she really wants to say. But yeah, 3 negatives, or rather, it's going to take 3 positives to balance out one one negative thought. So when we are examining our stories, we might also want to think about how we should orientate our stories. So I'm going to just put that in, kind of just keep that on the same level. And what do I mean by orientate our stories? It's like, well, what are our stories designed to do? What do we want them to empower us or disempower us? And I think that it doesn't make any sense that they should disempower us. And of course, most of us are really hard on ourselves when we're telling ourselves stories. So, and that does disempower us, as it steals our energy. It makes us just feel bad. It's like wandering about with our own kind of worst enemy, which is often what we're doing, because we're really tough on ourselves. So we want to orientate our stories in such a way that it's helpful for us. And I also think that we need to be, how about we approached it from if it was your best friend, what would you say to them? And what you're doing there when you're speaking to your best friend is you're looking for not looking to lie to them, and I don't think you should lie to yourself, because that gets you into all sorts of trouble, but instead you're looking to find the best version of the truth. So in other words, something you could tell them based on the truth that will help them feel how they want to feel it in the moment, and move in the direction that they want to go in. And for that, you need to know what direction you want to go in, of course, but you know you don't want to be in pain, and you know you want to feel better. So whenever it's a story you're telling yourself, orientate it in such a way that you can feel how you want to in the moment, and that should typically be positive in some way, shape or form, because that will bring more energy and point you in the right direction and empower you. So that, I think, is kind of really useful. And just to hammer that home a little bit more, if you tell yourself the truth, a version of the truth that's helpful for you, you'll move out of this stressful, threat based pain situation that you kind of keep facing, and get to be much freer in life, have a much better life. And you'll be able to trust yourself, because you're not saying stuff that's really hurtful all the time. And interestingly, if you can trust yourself, then you've got a fighting chance of loving yourself. Whereas if you can't trust yourself, you won't love yourself. So the stories you tell yourself, if they're overly pessimistic and catastrophizing, then the ability to love yourself is going to be probably just too big an ask. And if you don't, and you can see why then you maybe wouldn't even like yourself all that much, because you're always giving yourself a hard time. So I think coming back to this needless pain and suffering, it's look at our stories, examine them, see what they're like, tell ourselves the best version of the truth, a version that allows us to feel how we want to feel and move in the direction that we want to move in. So that would be kind of the second thing. And the third thing I would do is I think we need to reinforce our behaviour. Now, why do I say that? And I might spell this wrong, I think that's right. Reinforce our behaviour. Best right behaviour. Because if we only do it for a little while, then it's going to just drift back, isn't it? So we need ways of just nudging us along in the right direction. We actually want to change the bias, the positive negative bias in our brain. We want to change it to positive. And the way we do that is by habituating positive stories that are helpful. And when we get in the habit of those, we quite like them, and the other ones will start to die off. What happens actually before that is you start to get in a bit of an argument with yourself. You start to correct yourself, you start to be more honest with yourself, and you say, well, actually you weren't an idiot, you just made a mistake. Actually, you're not a loser. These things happen, and just get back up and go again at it. So we need to find ways of reinforcing our behaviour. So how would I do that? Well, let's say it's positive mental thinking, I would be thinking about maybe, and it is that, so I'd be thinking about books or things like TED Talks. So a couple of favourites, Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman, just loads and loads of proof that it's possible to be and to learn how to become more optimistic. So in other words, being optimistic is a skill, not how you were born. All right, so Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman, the great book. Mindset by Carol Dweck is also very good. And both of these people, Martin Seligman and Carol Dweck, have got great TED Talks where you get like a little intro, a little 10, 15, 20-minute kind of intro to the subjects if you're not the sort of person that reads books. And then from YouTube, if you've got that video, it'll flag up another one. But you want to be looking at things that'll help nudge you along in the right direction, because it's really hard to do that on your own. So yeah, kind of think about how do I reinforce a behaviour, and the longer you stick at that and the more benefit you get from it, the more it becomes you. That's just how you approach things now, because you haven't always approached things the way you do just now. You know, you've learned to do that, but it's been unconscious. And what I think makes a whole load of sense is that you learn to consciously program your mind, consciously point it and orientate it in the direction that's useful for you, and to come up with the sort of thoughts that are going to help you have a better life. So that's the third thing. And the fourth thing, a bit of a shameless plug at this, get some help. And I think coaches, or at least many coaches, will be really good for this. Isn't it hard to stay on track on our own? There's so many things that are dragging us in one direction and another and another. And one of my favourite expressions is keep the main thing the main thing. And in fact, for me, when my life changed is when I stopped being overwhelmed trying to push on lots of different things, but instead learned to pick one thing that was really important and keep it the main thing until I got good at it. And so to keep the main thing, then whether it's someone else that helps and supports you, and obviously number 3, reinforcing it with podcasts and videos and all of that, and books. If you get a coach, then they can help you come up with, if you like, kind of more skillful strategies for how to actually do this, and they can tell you where to start. And I guess that they create a framework and kind of a support structure, you know, that so that you can't just drop it. Because every time you drop it, you let yourself down. And I guess my question is, if you can't get control of your own mind, won't you always be in pain as a result of your own thoughts? And that to me is needless. And that's, that's the thing that I, as the happiness guy, want to help people stop having. Needless pain in their life. So these are my thoughts on the pain we create for ourselves, the needless suffering we create for ourselves. It's most of our life is the pain that we've got is coming. Most of the pain that we are suffering is absolutely needless. We're creating it ourselves. The situations themselves can be bad enough, but they're a fraction of the pain that we suffer. So if we can learn to become aware of our own thoughts, to examine the stories we're telling ourselves and see the nonsense and the pessimism for what it is and the catastrophizing, and change them and point them in a direction that is empowering and helps us go where we want to go in that direction, and then put in place some support structures to keep the main thing, then we might have a very different life. So apologies, it's been quite a long video, but I hope you do find it useful. And if you've got any questions or comments, then just ask. Take care. Thank you again. Bye-bye.